The Boruto series had a lot of heavily anticipated moments in the community. Some of them have already been revealed, like Sarada's MS Awakening, Boruto's return to Konoha, and more recently, Kawaki's new limitless power. But one of the most anticipated events that the Boruto series has to offer hasn't even been talked about in the manga, but many fans know that it will eventually become a reality, not only because of its presence in the anime, but because of some statements in recent interviews from IKEMOTO. And that of course is the infamous Jougan. Now the Jougan is undoubtedly one of the most mysterious topics, not only in the Boruto series, but the entire Naruto franchise. So many theories and stories linked to its origin and how it relates to Boruto. And as for me, I've made countless videos on it, going over its many abilities, lore, and anything else you could think of that relates to it. And as of chapter 25 of Boruto 2 VORTEX, we gotten a pretty good step closer to that day of mentioning. But first, before we dive into why that is, for it to make as much sense as possible, we gotta break down what the Jougan is and its function. So essentially, the Jougan, or Pure Eye, is a dojutsu that is linked to the gods of the Boruto universe. These gods originating from the Otsutsuki clan, so therefore, it has strong connections to them. Many different cultures have a different translation on what Jougan means, but they all roughly translate to the same category. For example, in Japanese culture, Jougan translates to pure eye. In Chinese culture, it translates to clean eye, as well as pure eye. In some other cultures, it can even be read as divine eye or eye of purity. And in Buddhist texts, it can be translated as clairvoyant eye. And might I add, when it comes to Buddhism, Naruto's lore is heavily related to that. So in conclusion, one thing we know for sure is the Jougan comes from divine origins. As for its known abilities, the information is limited, but most of which originates from the Otsutsuki clan, or has some ability that is related to clairvoyance, which is also an ability that originates from the Otsutsuki clan. For example, one of the abilities of the Jougan is to see chakra pathways and the disruption of said pathway. And along with this ability, it can also detect the quality of chakra, like detecting malice, negative emotions, etc. Towards the beginning of the anime, some people were being affected by Nue's chakra, which caused these negative emotions in chakra output. The Jougan was able to detect that manipulation of chakra, and this kind of reminds me of Naruto's ability to sense malice, once he was able to control Kurama's chakra. Since Kurama is a tailed beast, his ability to sense hatred is tied to the fact that all tailed beasts are formed from the Ten Tails chakra, which of course reacts strongly to this negative energy. So that right there is a clear connection between Boruto's Jougan and the Ten Tails, which is already of divine origin. Next ability is a classic Otsutsuki-like ability, the power to create rifts and perceive dimensional barriers. This is one of the first divine abilities we're introduced to in the series through multiple characters like Kaguya and Sasuke. Kaguya actually being an Otsutsuki, and Sasuke gaining the power directly from an Otsutsuki. But the one ability that is most interesting to me is clairvoyance. This is the Jougan's most overpowered ability, and it can be used in combat or any other way. Some may think the Jougan gives its user a heightened sense of perception in combat, more relatable to how the Sharingan works, but that really isn't the case. The Jougan not only can be used in direct combat, but it can also be used to predict the future, giving Boruto a sense of precognition in battles. The Sharingan gives its user a better sense of perception just by enhancing the senses, and these heightened senses allow them to see chakra as well as copy certain techniques, all while staying in the present time. But the Jougan coming from divine origins can see into the future to give Boruto what it seems like incredible perception. Look at when Boruto was fighting against Momoshiki. He used the Jougan to weave one of Momoshiki's attacks, or not like he used it, but it involuntarily activated and caused that sequence of events. But it wasn't that he perceived his movements and countered it on the fly. He seen into the future and knew what Momoshiki was going to do before he did it, which is why it is the ultimate dojutsu. No other eye gives its user that advantage in battle, because this has to do with time itself. Incoming Bleach 1000 Year Blood War anime spoilers. Skip ahead about 30 seconds if you haven't caught up or plan on watching it soon. But the ability that I'm mentioning is very similar to the Almighty, a very overpowered ability of Yhwach, which allows him to see and manipulate all possible futures. So basically every possible future where he doesn't win, he can manipulate so he doesn't lose the fight. He sees all possible counters that his enemy has and is able to negate it. He's basically unbeatable. However, that ability itself is more relatable to the 10 direction Shinjutsu. But it's the way Yhwach uses it in battle is where I related to Boruto's Jougan, because he uses it in battle to give him a sense of precognition of what his opponent will do next. That alone makes him nearly impossible to catch off guard, but no way am I saying this compares to that. I still think the Almighty is a far superior ability to have than the Jougan's precognition, because that's like if 10 directions was built into the Jougan, which is definitely a possibility, but as of right now, nothing is really confirmed. I'm just going off of what I've seen. So going further into the anime, what confirmed this to be precognition is when Boruto was able to see Urashiki's portal before it even manifested, which ended up aiding him and Shinki in this fight. This ability, and the one we seen during the Momoshiki fight, is the same exact thing, just used in different circumstances. So you see how versatile the Jougan can be. All the abilities of the eye are from the gods of the universe, because most of these abilities surpass human comprehension and capability. Okay, so how does all this relate to the overall story now? So as we all know, Momoshiki is the one who previously drove Boruto into a corner because of the karma seal being cursed upon him. But I believe that was always supposed to happen because Momoshiki was and still is the key for Boruto to manifest the Jougan. You see, one of the best theories I ever watched on YouTube as it pertains to Boruto's relationship to the gods of the verse is from Kiromaki, basically insinuating that Boruto is really Shibai and has planned everything that's happened in the past from the future. However, I think a little bit differently. I believe Shibai is his own unique existence. While I still think Shibai is the main perpetrator behind the events of the timeline, I don't think he's necessarily an evil Otsutsuki like many think. Therefore, his actions to shift the timeline will always be for the planet's best interest, just like Tonari Otsutsuki, who was shunned and disowned from his clan for such actions. Of course, this goes into Shibai's lore and how the Otsutsuki view him and how he viewed his own clan, but he might be in the same situation. Not every Otsutsuki was adored or loved, and not every Otsutsuki seen the way of their clan's actions as ethical or just. Boruto isn't Shibai, but he carries the will of Shibai, which by itself will be why the Jougan is able to manifest. However, Boruto still needed a way for the Jougan to activate. Remember, it's heavily linked to the Otsutsuki clan, meaning the only possible way for it to be unlocked is for Boruto himself to become an Otsutsuki, even if he had close connections to the Otsutsuki before Momoshiki bestowed a karma onto him. The only way for Boruto to become 100% Otsutsuki was through Momoshiki. This was a prerequisite for Boruto to manifest the Jougan, because in order for that to happen, you have to be of Otsutsuki descent. So in other words, Momoshiki has fulfilled his role that Shibai planned for him. When Tonari talked to Boruto during his dream, he mentioned things about the eye that was very telling on what may come in the future. One of the things he told Boruto was that his eye was a star of hope against destruction that will eventually come to pass. Now, the Star of Hope statement is probably just a metaphor, stating that his eye will give him the power to save the future. But when he says against destruction that will eventually come to pass, this is referring to Kawaki. He is the destruction in this statement, and I'm pretty sure that wasn't hard to deduce, since Kawaki's nickname is literally the Apostle of Destruction. It makes sense as to why Boruto was able to manifest the Jougan in response to this destruction, therefore shouldering the fate of the world. An unspecified amount of years in the future from now, Kawaki will go through with his plan of shinobi eradication across the 5 great nations, ending the era of shinobi forever. And after this plan comes into fruition, Kawaki is supposed to free Naruto and Hinata, and then unalive himself, which he said he wanted to do eventually anyway because of him being an Otsutsuki. But because of the gods, more specifically Shibai Otsutsuki, his will existing through Boruto will cause this awakening within him that will dispel darkness. You see, originally, during Boruto and Kawaki's final fight is when I initially thought Boruto was just gonna manifest the Jougan, judging from Kawaki's very surprised and off-guard reaction to this. But now, I don't believe this will be the only time Boruto reveals such power, but it'll be the first time Kawaki sees this power in action. The Jougan is one of the most overpowered abilities in the verse, so it's completely normal if it can't be used as a normal Rinnegan or Sharingan. I'm pretty sure it can only be activated within certain circumstances, so it's very possible Boruto could have awoken this power before he used it against Kawaki, and that time could possibly manifest because of Momoshiki, because I believe Momoshiki's only role wasn't just for Boruto to become an Otsutsuki in order for him to inherit the Jougan. His other role could be to become Boruto's means to get stronger, because right now in terms of strength, Boruto lacks in comparison to Kawaki and of course JURA. And we know Boruto and Kawaki need to team up to defeat JURA. Boruto already asked Momoshiki for power to vanquish JURA, but at the expense of his own body. Now obviously, this is only a ploy planned by Boruto for his own death by Kawaki's hands. But the timeline is gonna shift again to avoid that fate. It's already been confirmed since even before the first chapter of Boruto Part 1 concluded. It's also been a reoccurring theme dating back to Part 1. Every time Boruto is supposed to die, the timeline gets altered to a convenient outcome to where Boruto is saved by fate. It happened against Kawaki. Actually, now it happened twice against Kawaki and twice against JURA. So that's 4 times where Boruto escaped death. Once when Kawaki drove a hole right through his chest, another when Koji told Boruto that they escaped a future where both he and Sarada were killed by Kawaki, and then in Tubu Vortex when JURA sniped Boruto, and then again when they fought one-on-one. If you think this is a coincidence, then you're just simply stubborn. Because even JURA said it felt like a divine force was aiding Boruto, keeping him alive no matter the cost. That divine force is Shibai himself, altering the timeline to the best possible outcome for Boruto. Because Boruto can't die until he fights Kawaki. I mean, we all know that. In which Boruto states directly was the only possible outcome. So if you ask me how I interpret this, I think this is an outcome even Shibai couldn't avoid. Which is why he did everything necessary to prepare Boruto for this event. Because if Boruto is gonna stay alive this long, then this is one future that cannot be avoided no matter what. But in order for this future to become a reality, Momoshiki's soul must be suppressed under a superior power. A power made to dispel darkness. A power not even Momoshiki can overcome. Which is why the power is so feared by the Otsutsuki. And this will be the power that will either extinguish Momoshiki's soul, so Boruto can freely use the power of the karma without any repercussions, similar to Kawaki's situation, or force his soul to become one with Boruto's, which will give him the necessary power to be able to face the upcoming challenges that are to come in the future. And this is all orchestrated by Shibai, the real god of time. So I'd say this is more or less how I interpret Shibai into the story. His character more or less just being a plot device to make certain narratives and plot points connect together in the future. And also for Boruto to become what we all knew he was gonna be from the start, the hope for the planet and era of Shinobi. How do you guys think Shibai is connected to Boruto? And how do you think he will eventually deal with Momoshiki's evil soul so he can have access to even more power? Let me know all your thoughts about the future of the story, or even about the history of Shibai as well as the Otsutsuki to support this, or your own theory. But anyway, that's all from me today in my Jougan ramble. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. I definitely had a fun time writing and editing this. So if you could be so kind to show some love back, that would be much appreciated. So if you enjoyed this one, go ahead and like the video, comment, subscribe, and turn on post notifications so you don't miss another video like this, or when I go live for chapter spoilers. And until my next one, I'll see you boys and girls later, and I'm out. Peace.